Theon Greyjoy stood beneath the great oak in the courtyard of the ancient keep, the wind clawing at his cloak as the scents of wet earth and horseflesh mingled with the tang of cold steel. Winterfell rose around him like some mythic beast, gray stone, thick walls, the remnants of snow clinging stubbornly in the crevices. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows, painting the yard in a softened hush that belied the tensions simmering beneath every breath he took. He closed his eyes to shut out the swirl of memories, images of Pike, of his father Balon's stony glare, of the surging ocean swallowing the horizon, and also of the day he was taken as ward to House Stark, a quiet boy anxious to prove himself. He had grown to think of Winterfell as his home, though he had always carried the burden of being an outsider, neither Stark nor smallfolk, neither prisoner nor free. A ward, they called him, but perhaps a hostage was the sharper word. Yet something in the north had burrowed into his heart. The honor and loyalty of House Stark, the way old Nan's stories made these halls echo with ancient legends, the way Ned Stark treated him not like a piece of property but a young man who needed guidance. Over time, Theon had come to cherish Robb Stark like a brother. He teased Bran the way older siblings do. He winked at Arya and earned her laughter, tried to teach Rickon a few words of the Iron Islands dialect, and once even shared a conspiratorial chuckle with Sansa about the southern lords visiting the castle. Despite the frosty stares some of the northern lords still gave him, he found that Winterfell was a place of belonging more so than the harsh islands he had left behind as a boy. Even so, doubt trailed him like a shadow. The memory of his father's face the last time they'd spoken was a wound. Balon Greyjoy had looked upon him with a cold question in his eyes. Are you Ironborn, or have you let the wolves claim you? All these years, Theon had asked himself the same question in the darkest parts of the night. But now, as the War of the Five Kings was about to explode into full fury across the Seven Kingdoms, Theon could feel the tides of fate shifting around him. The Riverlands were ablaze, King's Landing roiled with rumors of madness, and Robb Stark had marched south to answer his father's call, then swiftly to avenge Ned Stark's death. The king in the north, men called Robb, their young lord with the fury of a winter storm in his eyes. Yet that crown weighed heavily on all of them. Robb had beckoned Theon with him, and Theon had followed willingly. A part of him had hungered to see Pike, to test the waters of home again. He had believed once that perhaps his father would rally to the Stark cause if Theon but spoke with him face to face. But the deeper loyalty that had grown within his heart made him hesitate. He decided, no, I will not go to Pike, not yet. If Balon wants to join the war, he will send a raven. If he stands aloof, then I will stand with the wolves. A simple choice on the surface, but Theon knew it would shape his destiny. He had gambled his pride. He would hold nothing back. When the decision was made, Theon had marched alongside Robb to the Whispering Wood, fought at his side, helped to capture the Kingslayer, and proven himself in battle. It felt exhilarating. He was not merely some uncertain youth but a warrior forging his own path. Now he had returned to Winterfell to oversee matters for a time while Robb pressed deeper into the south. Theon had arrived the day before, exhausted from a long ride, longing to see the gray walls that were no longer merely stone and mortar to him but a place that cradled his better nature. With each step across the courtyard, his resolve to remain loyal to House Stark had only strengthened. He ran his hand along the oak's rough bark. The wind rattled the branches overhead. There was a chill that clung to his bones, as though the north itself had found a place inside him. He supposed that was only right. Even the drowned god might be overshadowed here by the old gods of the forest, those silent faces in the heart trees that saw into the souls of men. Perhaps they saw into his heart as well, recognized the truth of what he felt. He thought of Robb in the field, leading his soldiers. Of Ned Stark, gone now, executed under the orders of the Boy King in King's Landing. Of all that had happened. And with a sudden clarity, Theon knew there was no turning back. He exhaled, turning on his heel to cross the yard. A stable boy scurried by, short of breath, eyes wide. Theon recognized him, Mickon's nephew. The boy nearly tripped over his own feet trying to bow. Theon gave him a short nod and continued on, boots scraping the compacted dirt and old straw. The gates of Winterfell yawned open, and beyond them the rolling expanse of the north beckoned with a wide sky of shifting grays. He made his way toward the great keep. Within, the corridors felt quieter than usual, as though a hush had fallen over the entire castle. So many men had ridden south with Robb that Winterfell was left somewhat sparsely guarded, though enough remained to protect it from any brigands or restless neighbors. A ghost of a smile tugged at Theon's lips. If the Iron Islands had joined the Starks, Winterfell might be safer. But Theon had heard no word from Pike, no sign of Balon Greyjoy's alliance. He took that as answer enough. In the hall, a handful of guards conversed in low tones. They rose to attention when they saw Theon, and he nodded in return. He might be no Stark, but he had authority here now, a right to give commands on behalf of Robb. He relished that weight of responsibility. Perhaps it was a taste of what might have been if his father had not led a doomed rebellion long ago, Theon Greyjoy in a position of power, shaping destinies and forging alliances. But that was a fleeting fancy. Theon cast it aside, remembering the earnest face of Robb Stark, the brother he had chosen, and all the burdens that lay ahead. He recalled a moment not 2 days past when Robb had clasped his hand before riding off. "You are my brother," Robb had said. "You know I would trust no other with Winterfell while I am gone. Keep them safe, Theon. You are my brother." Theon had clung to those words like a man clutches a rope above a precipice. They mattered more than he could express. And so he would not abandon Winterfell or betray the trust that had been placed in him, no matter how the shifting tides of the war beckoned him back to the sea. Bran Stark sat on the high seat of the Lord of Winterfell, the sunlight from the narrow windows casting a warm haze across his face. The chair dwarfed him, but the boy held himself with a quiet dignity that Theon could not help but admire. Being the son of Eddard Stark and brother of the king in the north had demanded Bran grow quickly in the aftermath of tragedy. The direwolf Summer lay near the dais, watching with keen golden eyes. When Theon entered the hall, Bran looked up and a flicker of relief passed over his features. Some of the Stark bannermen might have raised eyebrows at a Greyjoy standing near the seat of the North's rule, but the boy lord only saw a friend. Theon approached the dais with a respectful dip of his head. He was not entirely certain of the proper courtesies, but the sincerity he felt would suffice. "My lord," Theon said, voice echoing slightly beneath the vaulted ceiling. Bran inclined his head in response. "Theon, you need not call me that. You've known me since I was small." Theon offered a half-smile. "Yet you were Lord of Winterfell in Robb's absence. And I respect that." He looked around, noting a few of the men in the hall waiting with small matters, winter stores, disputes over farmland. The daily business of the keep. "Shall we speak in private after you finish here?" Bran's brow furrowed, but he nodded. "Yes. Let's hear these good folk first." Theon watched as the men of the north approached the dais in turn. It amazed him how deftly Bran handled their concerns. He looked so young, still just a boy, but the way he posed questions, the calm thoughtfulness with which he heard them all out, he had some of Ned Stark's wisdom in him. Theon sensed there was a gravity in Bran that might have gone unnoticed had tragedy not struck the Starks. Yet, the boy was forging himself anew. When the last man left, satisfied by Bran's judgment, the hall emptied except for the two of them and the direwolf. Theon came closer, resting one foot upon the dais steps, arms loosely folded. "You are doing well," he said, genuine pride in his voice. Bran offered a small smile. "I never wanted to sit here, but I know what I must do." Theon said. "Duty can be heavy." Bran's gaze flicked to the massive doors of the hall, ensuring they were quite alone. His voice grew subdued. "You have heard nothing from father, from Pike, I mean?" Theon's expression tightened. He had told Bran and Maester Luwin that he'd sent a raven to Balon, requesting aid for the king in the north. It had been half a hope, half a desperate gamble. No word. "I doubt he will send help. My father is proud." He almost spat the word, as though it tasted foul. Bran nodded somberly. "So then we have only ourselves. I worry for Robb, and for Mother. We all do, but we must trust in your brother's skill and fortune," Theon said, trying to sound confident. He glanced toward a high, arched window, where a single beam of light illuminated floating motes of dust. "We'll hold Winterfell for him. We'll keep it safe, no matter what comes." Summer rose from his place on the stones, trotting over to Theon's side to sniff at his boots. The dire wolf was the size of a small pony now, its fur a blend of silver and gray, muzzle alert. Theon felt a strange stirring of awe whenever he beheld the dire wolves. They were a testament to something old and wild in the north, something that recognized friend and foe by instinct. Summer's eyes lifted to Theon's, and Theon felt a flicker of acceptance there. For all that had passed, he was no enemy to the wolves. "Thank you," Bran said softly. "I know this can't be easy, turning your back on your father's land." Theon gave a shrug, affecting nonchalance. "I never knew my father's land the way I know Winterfell. The sea is in my blood, yes, but the love of the Starks is what kept me alive and gave me purpose. I won't lie, it gnaws at me that there is no reconciliation, no alliance, but..." He let the words linger. There was no point in lamenting. But I have chosen to stand with Robb, and that is all. Bran studied Theon's face, a glimmer of empathy passing across his own. We are all in this war together, he murmured. I am glad you're with us. Those words touched Theon's heart more deeply than he expected. Somewhere, in the hidden corners of his mind, the boy he had been might have wept with gratitude. He turned away, blinking, and cleared his throat. I'll take a tour of the walls, check with the guard. I want to see how our defenses stand. Bran nodded. Go. You have my leave. Theon dipped his head and moved toward the door. Summer's heavy footsteps padded behind him for a moment, as though to follow, but the direwolf then returned to Bran's side. Theon left the great hall with renewed purpose thrumming in his blood. He would not fail the family that had taken him in. Winterfell was in his trust, and though it might never truly be his, he would guard it as fiercely as if it were. A raven arrived at dawn 3 days later, carrying news that shook Winterfell to its roots. Ser Rodrik Castle read the parchment with grim dismay, then had Maester Luwin repeat its contents to Theon and Bran in his turret study. The gist was this: Balon Greyjoy had crowned himself king of the Iron Islands. He had launched raids along the northern coastline, Deepwood Motte had been attacked, and a half-dozen fishing villages burned. Asha Greyjoy, Theon's sister, was rumored to be commanding men on the mainland pressing inland. Theon felt the words stab into him like knives. His father had acted not in alliance with the Starks, but in direct opposition. He had taken advantage of the chaos of war to try to carve out his own kingdom once more. The memory of that old rebellion rose in Theon's mind with a sudden clarity. Pike in flames, the Iron Fleet broken, the death of his brothers. Balon had learned nothing from the ruin that had befallen him the last time. Or perhaps he simply didn't care. Maester Luwin's voice trembled as he read the final lines. Balon Greyjoy declares that the North is ripe for the taking. He spurns any notion of bending the knee to the Starks or to any southern king. He calls himself the true heir of the Iron Price. Silence weighed upon the turret like a funeral shroud. Theon's breath hissed out slowly. He could not quite quell the storm of anger and hurt blossoming in his chest. Even as a boy, he had yearned for his father's acceptance. Now, instead of forging an alliance that might bring Theon home in triumph, Balon had declared open war on the North, on House Stark, on everything Theon had come to hold dear. Bran's eyes were wide, a swirl of shock and betrayal in them. Ser Rodrik stood beside him, lips pressed tight. The old knight looked at Theon not with suspicion but with profound sadness. I am sorry, Ser Rodrik said quietly. I know this tears at your heart. Theon swallowed hard. It does, but there's no question of where I stand. He forced his tone to be steady, though inside he was reeling. I will defend Winterfell against any who try to harm it, including my own kin. If my father wants to take the North, he'll have to face me too. For a moment, none spoke. Then Bran reached out, pale hands gripping the arms of his chair. We should send word to Robb, he said. He must know that the Ironborn have begun their invasion. Aye, Maester Luwin said, folding the parchment. I shall prepare the ravens. Ser Rodrik sighed. We must also decide how best to shore up our defenses. Winterfell is inland, but if the Ironborn push far enough. I will not let them, Theon said, voice firm. He could imagine his sister, Asha, at the head of a column of fierce Ironborn warriors forging a path of pillage and blood. She had never been one to shy away from bold action. Now, if she advanced on Winterfell itself. Theon's stomach twisted. He breathed in and tried to remain calm. Have we any word on the size of their force? Their location? Only rumors, Maester Luwin murmured. They say Asha commands a few longships worth of men, but no one seems to know her precise strength. Ser Rodrik took a deep breath. I will gather what men we have and attempt to bolster the areas nearest the coast. But if the Ironborn slip behind us somehow, I may need to recall some men from the south. Theon cut in. That might leave Winterfell more vulnerable. We must be careful. Bran looked at Theon, eyes brimming with an unspoken plea. Fix this, please. Theon clenched his jaw. I will ride out if need be. We cannot allow them to burn more villages with impunity. Ser Rodrik glanced at Bran, who gave a faint nod. Yes, we should ride out to meet them, Bran said in the quiet, resolute way he had. If they grow bold and come deeper inland, many will suffer. I'll start gathering a company, Ser Rodrik declared. We can leave on the morrow. Theon, I'll accompany you, Theon said, anticipating the knight's words. I know their tactics. I can at least offer that insight. Ser Roderick reached out and put a hand on Theon's shoulder, the gesture both firm and supportive. Theon felt a tightness in his throat, the weight of conflicting loyalties pressing down. He inhaled, letting the tension settle into cold steel in his heart. If the Ironborn attacked, he would be first in line to repel them. That was all there was to it. Bran thanked them all, a trembling note in his voice that spoke of how this new threat unsettled him. Theon understood this was an attack not only on the north, but on Bran's sense of security. The boy had already lost so much. Theon silently promised that he would not let him lose his home as well. They dispersed from the turret, each with tasks to accomplish. As Theon left, the maester's voice echoed in his mind. Balon Greyjoy declares war. Theon scowled, stepping out into the crisp morning air. The ramparts of Winterfell beckoned, a vantage point from which he might see the wide horizon. He felt compelled to stand upon those walls, to stare outward, as though he might spot the sails of the Iron Fleet creeping along the horizon. Yet there was no ocean here, no gulls or crashing surf, only the endless forests and plains of the north, stretching in every direction beneath a gray sky. He made his way up the stone steps to the battlements and looked out over the sprawl of Winterfell's outer buildings, the stables, the smithy, the godswood beyond. Snow had melted in patches, leaving the ground sodden. Smoke drifted from the chimneys, carrying the scent of woodfire. The castle, in the early sunlight, looked solid and unassailable. Yet Theon knew war had a way of breaching walls in ways one never expected. He closed his eyes, letting the chill wind rake through his hair. The ghost of Pike floated through his memories. Battered towers perched above black, raging seas, rope bridges whipping in the storm winds. His father's voice, so distant, echoing in harsh condemnation. But Theon felt no pull toward that life now. He recognized that what he had yearned for all these years, Balon's approval, a place in the Iron Islands, was never truly within reach. Perhaps it had been an illusion all along. The Ironborn who had once been his family were strangers now. If they came for the north, they would find him standing in their path. He opened his eyes. Another day had begun, and there was work to do. That evening, Theon oversaw preparations for the small host Ser Roderick would lead out to meet the Ironborn threat. They had only a few hundred men left at Winterfell, enough to guard the castle and still send out a decent force. Every suit of mail was checked, every horse's saddle and bridle inspected for wear. Theon personally tested the weight of his sword and axe, ensuring they were sharp. He intended to ride alongside Ser Roderick to lend whatever knowledge he had of his people's ways in raiding and pillaging. But these were his people only in blood. Theon's true loyalty was here, among these men who called him friend. As they made final checks in the courtyard, men hurried about, strapping supplies to mules and pack horses. Dusk began to blanket the sky in hues of lavender and deeper gray. Torches were lit along the walls. Theon lifted one hand, beckoning a stable hand to hold the reins of his mount. Near the well, he caught sight of a slender figure, Osha, the wildling woman who had pledged service to the Starks after her capture. She was helping gather furs and cloaks, her eyes flickering curiously toward Theon. He walked over, nodding. "Osha, you've been of help to Bran, I hear." She looked at him sidelong. I mind the little lord help him with what I can. 'Tis better than wandering beyond the wall these days." He studied her a moment. She had a certain wild grace. "Do you know how to handle a spear?" he asked. "A bit," she said warily. He offered a small grin. "We can use all the help we can get. The Ironborn are no simple band of thieves. If they come this far, we'll need everyone who can fight." Her lips thinned, but she nodded. "I'll stand for Winterfell if that's what you're skinned. That's exactly what I'm asking." Theon clapped her lightly on the shoulder, then turned away. He felt strangely heartened by her reading. The North drew people of all stripes beneath its banner when it was threatened. If only Balon Greyjoy could see that the wolves he would face were not some broken pack, but a gathering of those who believed in the Stark cause. Theon prayed that would count for something when steel clashed against steel. As he returned to the gathering men, a voice hailed him from behind. "Greyjoy." He turned to find Ser Roderick with a folded parchment. The old knight offered it to him. "A fresh raven from the west. Reports that Asha Greyjoy was seen heading inland from Deepwood Motte, perhaps toward Torrens Square. The castellan there begs for assistance." Torrens Square lay westward, a strong keep but not unassailable. The Ironborn could attempt to seize it a stepping stone deeper into the north. Theon's jaw clenched. We leave at dawn? Yes. That's not soon enough for them, I fear, but it's the best we can do, Ser Roderick said. Ready yourself. The ride will be swift and hard. Theon touched the parchment, feeling the weight of it, the echo of his sister's ambition in every word. She'll be expecting a weak or divided response. Let's surprise her. Ser Roderick nodded. He eyed Theon kindly, as though well aware of the turmoil in the young man's heart. It's a difficult thing to stand against one's family, he said quietly. Theon was silent for a long moment, thinking of Balan and Asha. I'm not standing against family, he said at last. I'm standing with my family. He turned and walked away, ignoring the roil of confusion under his ribs. Winterfell was the only home he could claim now, and if his own father threatened that home, then blood ties be damned. Theon Greyjoy would stand with the wolves. Dawn broke silver and cold as Theon mounted his horse and rode out with Ser Roderick's force. They numbered some 200 cavalry and a handful of foot soldiers, enough to march quickly but still offer a sting to any raiders they encountered. The winter air stung Theon's cheeks and his breath plumed in front of him with each exhalation. Bundled in furs, he felt the solidity of mail beneath. His sword hung at his side, an axe strapped to his saddle. These men around him, mostly older, grizzled veterans of the Stark household guard, accepted his presence without question. He could read the trust in their eyes, or at least the acceptance that he fought for them and not against them. They wended their way west from Winterfell, through snowy fields and sparse forests. Theon could almost feel the presence of the old gods in the twisted shapes of the northern trees, as though the land itself watched. The ride was harsh. Icicles clung to branches overhead, and the ground underfoot was muddy and half-frozen. At times they passed through villages, and the small folk there greeted them with anxious relief, pressing hot cider or meager offerings of bread. Theon saw fear in their eyes. News of the Ironborn raids had spread swiftly, and the sight of armed knights was a promise of protection. Despite the caking mud on their boots and the long hours of travel, Ser Roderick pressed the company onward. There was little chance to rest more than a few hours at a time. Theon hardly noticed the fatigue, driven by an urgency in his gut. Asha Greyjoy was cunning and bold. If she seized Torrhen's Square quickly, she could use it as a base to strike deeper or fortify herself against a siege. Theon imagined what might happen if reinforcements from Pike poured in. No, better to meet her swiftly. Better to drive the Ironborn back before they could sow more chaos. On the third day of hard riding, they reached a region of rolling hills cloaked in pine. The chill wind carried the scent of resin. The sky threatened snow, heavy gray clouds swirling. A scout galloped up, breathless. I've seen smoke beyond the ridge, he said, pointing west. Could be Torrhen's Square or a village near it. Ser Roderick cursed under his breath. We ride. They spurred their horses up the ridge, hooves pounding against the half-frozen soil. Topping the crest, they beheld a thin spiral of smoke in the distance. Theon's heart hammered. It was more than a single chimney's smoke, thicker and darker. Theon feared the worst. They rode down the far slope, forging onward until they reached a small cluster of huts that had been put to the torch. Bodies of villagers lay scattered, the smell of burnt flesh and charred wood choking the air. Theon dismounted, swallowing bile, as Ser Roderick muttered a prayer. This was the way of Ironborn raids, swift and brutal, leaving destruction in their wake. A deep anger flared in Theon's chest. He strode among the ruins, stepping past still-burning embers. An older woman, half alive, staggered out from behind a collapsed wall. Her cheeks were streaked with soot and tears. She trembled as Theon reached for her, supporting her weight. Who did this? He asked softly, though he already knew. They came from the sea, she said in a ragged breath. Men in iron armor. A woman at their head. She laughed as she lit the fires. Asha, Theon thought, a cold knot in his stomach. He gently handed the woman over to one of the soldiers, who gave her water. Ser Roderick was already ordering the men to search for survivors, to put out any lingering fires. Theon stood there, fists clenched. How many had died? How many more would die if they did not stop the raiders? With a resolute set to his jaw, Theon returned to Ser Roderick's side. This village is only an hour's ride from Torrhen's Square. She must be heading there now. Ser Roderick nodded grimly. We ride on immediately. Leave a few men here to tend to the wounded. They continued, hearts heavy from the sight of the ruin. The path led them around a wooded copse, the old pines creaking overhead. A hush seemed to fall, but the tension crackled like an arrow set to a bow. Theon could hear the blood pounding in his ears. They emerged from the forest near a clearing, and there they saw the glint of steel, Ironborn outriders, some 30 strong, setting up a perimeter. Asha's main force couldn't be far off. Theon and Ser Roderick exchanged a swift glance. The knights spurred forward, Theon riding at their head, sword drawn. Surprise lit the Ironborns' faces. Theon felt an odd twisting in his chest, seeing their familiar style of armor and the kraken sigils on their surcoats. But he had no hesitation. He bellowed a wordless cry, and the Stark's men thundered down upon the Ironborn. Swords flashed in the morning light, hoofs churned mud. Theon ducked a swung axe, bringing his own blade across a reaver's chest. Blood sprayed across the ground. Another raider lunged with a spear, and Theon twisted in the saddle, chopping down. His heart hammered in his chest, but his mind was cold, calculating. He had sparred with Robb 1,000 times, trained with Ser Rodrik, learned from the best knights in the north. He was no stranger to battle, and though these men fought with savage ferocity, they were not unstoppable. Shouts rent the air, steel against steel. Theon glanced to his right and saw one of the Stark men tumbling from his horse, a crossbow bolt in his shoulder. Theon gritted his teeth, urging his mount forward. A second wave of Ironborn poured from the trees, trying to flank them, but Ser Rodrik's cavalry pivoted expertly. Within minutes, the Ironborn were routed, those who still lived scattering in the undergrowth. Only a handful were taken prisoner. Theon stared down at them, chest heaving. They were men like him, iron in their hearts, but with eyes now filled with desperation. He wondered if his father had promised them easy spoils. Ser Rodrik barked orders. A few men would remain behind to secure the prisoners, see to the wounded. The main company would press on. Theon volunteered to ride ahead with a vanguard of scouts to find Asha Greyjoy's main force. Ser Rodrik consented, though not without concern for Theon's safety. But Theon insisted. This was as much his fight as anyone's, more so. They found Asha's camp not an hour further west. Smoke rose from hastily dug fire pits. Perhaps 200 Ironborn were assembled there, their longships presumably moored somewhere along the coastline. The field was dotted with stakes and makeshift defenses, but the Greyjoy banners fluttered brazenly. Theon motioned for his men to stay hidden behind a ridge while he studied the situation. At the center of the encampment, he saw a figure leaning over a camp table, surrounded by reavers. The figure straightened, tossing back a mane of dark hair. Even at this distance, Theon recognized Asha's sharp, confident movements. She looked so sure of herself, why wouldn't she? The Ironborn had rarely faced serious resistance in these northern raids so far. That was about to change. Theon slipped back to Ser Rodrik, who had arrived with the main host. They conferred in hushed tones. Theon explained the layout. The Ironborn had the advantage of a defensive position, but they also were fewer in number than the Stark force, if only slightly. They had the advantage of speed and surprise. If they attacked now, they might catch the raiders unprepared. But the Greyjoys were fearsome fighters. Asha especially was cunning. She might have traps or ambush points waiting. Ser Rodrik weighed the options. Finally, he decided they would press the attack at once, before the Ironborn could entrench themselves further or slip away to ravage more villages. They formed up, archers at the back, cavalry on the wings, infantry at the center. Theon rode with the cavalry, near the front. He could feel the tension in the air, the hush before the storm of battle. The men around him shuffled nervously, checking reins and harnesses. He thought of Robb Stark leading great battles in the south. Theon wanted to prove himself worthy of the trust Robb had placed in him. If he could defeat the Ironborn here, it would be a victory not only for the north, but for Theon's soul as well, proof that his loyalty was not just words, but action. At Ser Rodrik's signal, a horn blast shattered the stillness. The Northmen surged forward, and Theon was carried along in the wave of horseflesh and steel. The ridge dropped away beneath them, and the Ironborn encampment sprawled below, shouts of alarm echoing across the field. Arrows hissed through the air, some finding purchase in shield or flesh, others clattering harmlessly. Theon urged his horse to leap a crude stake barrier, his pulse racing. It was chaos. Smoke, screams, the clash of metal. He cut down a reaver who lunged at him with a spiked mace. Blood sprayed across the damp ground. Another raider came from Theon's left, warhammer raised. Theon parried, feeling the shock rattle up his arms. Then, with a savage twist, he drove his blade into the man's gut. The reaver collapsed in a gasping heap. Around Theon, the cavalry hammered into the Ironborn lines, breaking their formation. Theon heard the howls of wounded men, the snapping of spear shafts, the ring of steel on steel that made the air tremble. He caught a glimpse of Asha across the melee, her dark hair streaming, twin axes in her hands, eyes alive with feral glee. She was spurring her men, calling them to stand fast. With a fierce cry, she clashed with a Stark soldier, her axes flashing. The man tried to raise his shield, but Asha's blow splintered it, and she opened his throat with the second axe. Theon felt a jolt of horror, and an odd, distant pride. She was his sister, after all, unstoppable in battle. He angled his mount toward her, hoping to reach her side, speak to her if he could. But the throng of warriors intercepted him. Ironborn after Ironborn came at him, some cursing his name. Traitor, they spat as if they knew him. He hissed curses back, hacking and cutting, determined to push through. Step by bloody step, he forced his horse forward. Ser Roderick's men pressed on, forming a shield wall in places. The ground was soon slick with blood and churned mud. Swords and axes rose and fell. Ironborn archers loosed arrows into the fray, felling friend and foe alike. Theon ducked one that whirred past his ear. Then suddenly the Ironborn ranks faltered. The Northmen had more numbers, more discipline, and the cavalry charges had shattered the raiders' attempt at a cohesive line. One by one, or in small knots, the Ironborn began to break away, either fleeing or regrouping in a desperate attempt to hold off the inevitable. Asha, in the center of it all, saw the tide turning. She shouted orders Theon could not hear. Then she fought her way to a black courser, swung astride it with a fluid leap, and spurred it out of the camp. Theon let out a frustrated roar, urging his mount in pursuit. He would not let her slip away, not after all the blood she had spilled on northern soil. He galloped after her through the swirling chaos, weaving past a half-collapsed tent. 2 Ironborn lunged at him, but he wheeled around, slashing them aside. Asha was already halfway to the wooded edge of the field. She had a handful of reavers with her. Theon kicked his horse's flanks, and the beast stretched into a full run. Ahead, Asha glanced back, her face set in determination. She spurred onward, disappearing between the trees. Theon pounded after her, branches whipping at him. The forest floor was treacherous, strewn with roots and rocks. More than once, Theon nearly lost his seat, but he clung on. He could hear the crashing of hoofbeats from behind him, some Stark cavalry giving chase. At last, the terrain forced them to slow. Asha reined in, dismounting with an exasperated snarl. Theon reined in as well, sword in hand. Asha had only 3 or 4 men left with her, each bloodied from the battle. She turned to face Theon, axes raised, hair wild about her face. For a moment, neither sibling spoke. Their eyes locked in a silent war of their own. "You traitorous dog," Asha spat. "You would lead the wolves against your own kin?" Theon dismounted, keeping his sword at the ready. His heart hammered. "This is not my doing," he retorted, voice raw. "It's father's folly. You butcher these people, burn their homes. You expect me to stand by while you wage war on the Starks." Asha's eyes narrowed. "You are a Greyjoy. Or have you forgotten that while you warmed your heels in Winterfell playing Petwolf?" He took a step closer, sword pointed at the ground but angled slightly in her direction. "I have not forgotten. But you and father have. We lost the last rebellion. And yet you persist in attacking the north. You'll bring ruin upon us all again." Her laughter was bitter. "Oh, little brother, how deep your delusion runs. Father knows exactly what he wants, what the Iron Islands have always wanted. Independence, the old ways, paying the iron price. We do not bend the knee to some wolf king or southern boy with a crown." Theon's anger flared. "Then you condemn yourselves to another defeat. The North will not stand idle. Robb Stark is no feckless boy. The Lannisters have learned that already. Now you will too." He gestured back toward the battlefield. "Your men are broken." Asha's reavers, cornered, bared their teeth like wounded animals. One lunged at Theon with a desperate cry. Theon sidestepped, driving his blade into the man's side. Blood spurted, and the Ironborn collapsed. A second advanced with a spear, but an arrow from behind Theon whistled through the air, lodging in the man's throat. He fell gurgling. Stark cavalry had arrived, forming a ring around them. Asha's last 2 reavers glared about, panic in their eyes. She saw it was over. Still, she raised her axes, defiant. "So you'd murder your own sister for the sake of these wolves? Come on, then." Theon felt his chest constrict. He did not wish to kill her, but the determination to protect Winterfell surged within him. "Yield," he said quietly. "Yield, and perhaps you'll live." Asha's expression twisted. For a heartbeat, Theon thought she might hurl herself at him in one final, savage assault. but the ring of drawn swords around her was tight. The archers with bows at the ready, the knights with lances lowered. Slowly, Asha let her axes drop. Her men did the same. Theon exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He gestured to the Stark soldiers. "Disarm them, bind them, we'll bring them back to Winterfell. Let them stand trial there." The cavalry obeyed, seizing Asha's axes. She glowered at Theon as they bound her hands behind her back. Her voice was a ragged whisper. "You've chosen your side well, brother. But don't think father will leave it at this. Balon Greyjoy does not forgive betrayals." Theon's jaw tightened. "It's he who betrayed me." The words felt final in his mouth, a severing of that last lingering thread of loyalty. He looked away, feeling a strange ache behind his eyes. Though he believed in what he was doing, part of him mourned the family he had lost, the father and sister who would never truly be his again. The soldiers took Asha and her surviving men back to the battlefield. Smoke still drifted from the ruined camp, and the groans of the wounded lingered in the air. Ser Roderick was organizing the cleanup, assisting the injured, gathering prisoners. When he saw Asha, a flicker of surprise crossed his features. He turned to Theon. "This is your sister, then?" Theon nodded, dismounting again. "Yes." He cleared his throat, unsure of what else to say. Ser Roderick looked at her gravely. "She will answer for the deaths she has caused." Asha tossed her head. "Spare me your northern justice. We are at war. These are the fortunes of battle." His gaze hardened. "You took innocent lives, small folk. Did they raise a sword against you?" Theon's stomach churned. "Can we keep the speeches for later?" he managed. He didn't want to hear Asha's brazen justifications right now. Ser Roderick nodded. "Yes. Let us first see to our wounded. Secure the prisoners." As the men led Asha away, she barked a short laugh, throwing Theon one last scorching look. He forced himself not to react. This was done. The remains of her force would be carried to Winterfell in chains. Theon felt an odd sense of finality. He had captured his own sister to protect the Starks. There would be no going back to the Iron Islands now. He wondered if Balon even still considered him a son. The ride back to Winterfell was grim, burdened by the wounded and the dead. They took what spoils they could salvage from the battlefield, leaving behind pyres to burn the bodies in as much respect as war could afford. The captives were tied behind horses or carted in wagons if they were too injured to walk. Asha rode in silence, hands bound, eyes flicking over the terrain. Theon did not speak to her. He had no words that could bridge the gulf between them. When they arrived at Winterfell's gates, the small folk peered out with a mix of relief and fear. Word of the Ironborn threat had preceded them. Now, seeing dozens of captives, the people muttered curses and spat at the ground in front of them. Theon rode at the head, ignoring the bitter taste in his mouth. They dismounted in the courtyard. Bran was there to meet them, looking weary and anxious, seated in a wheeled chair that Hodder pushed. Summer prowled by his side, ears alert. Theon saw the boy's gaze linger on the prisoner's, apprehension in his eyes. "Ser Roderick, Theon, you've returned safely," Bran said quietly. Ser Roderick knelt by the chair in deference. "We have, my lord. Torrens Square and the surrounding lands have been spared further harm thanks to our swift action." Bran's gaze flicked to Asha. "Who is she?" Theon cleared his throat. "My sister, Asha Greyjoy. She led the Ironborn raiders." Bran's eyes widened. He looked at Theon, then at her. He had probably never seen a woman warrior quite so fierce, especially one with eyes that glinted like she was measuring him for a coffin. A shiver passed through the boy. "I see," he said. "Then we must hold her for trial as we would any foe." Asha barked a laugh. "Trial? You Starks love your trials. I'll have no lord's justice." Her pride was unbowed. Bran's jaw tightened, though fear and uncertainty flickered there too. Theon felt an impulse to protect the boy from Asha's contempt. "She's our prisoner," he said firmly. "She'll be treated fairly, but she will stand for what she's done." Asha gave him a mocking smile. Theon turned away, ignoring the twist in his stomach. Let her sneer. She was in chains now and would remain so. Ser Roderick and the guards led the prisoners to the dungeons beneath Winterfell. A hush settled over the courtyard as they disappeared. Theon let out a long breath. Bran looked up at him. "I'm glad you're safe," the boy said softly. I wasn't sure." Theon managed a tired smile. "We had the numbers. And I told you I wouldn't let them harm our people." Bran looked at him curiously, picking up on that word choice, our people. "You did well, Theon. Father would have been proud. Something caught in Theon's throat. Father. He thought of Ned Stark, the father he'd grown to respect and admire in a way he never had belonged. He hoped Ned might indeed have been proud of him for protecting Winterfell. Theon nodded, swallowing the sudden emotion. Thank you. Hodder shifted behind the chair, repeating the name quietly, Hodder, Hodder, as if to break the moment's tension. Summer pressed against Bran's leg, gazing up at Theon with those deep golden eyes. The dire wolf let out a soft chuff as though acknowledging him. Theon reached down to scratch behind Summer's ears, heart pounding with the swirl of relief and sorrow. I should see to the men, he said, stepping back. We lost good soldiers out there. They'll need help and comfort for the families. Bran nodded. I'll be in the Great Hall soon. We can honor them properly. Theon turned away, crossing the yard to where the wounded soldiers were being helped off horses. He offered a hand to one who was barely able to walk. The man looked up at Theon, gratitude in his eyes. Theon felt a pang of humility. This was his path now, to serve the North, to protect it. Later, as the sun dipped behind the walls, Theon found himself drifting toward the Godwood. His mind was a storm of conflicting thoughts, the memory of Asha's sneering face, the final severing from his father's house, the feeling that though he had chosen the North, he was still an outsider. He passed beneath the ancient weirwood trees, their twisted trunks bearing carved faces with red sap tears. He paused by the heart tree, the face carved there seeming to watch him solemnly. The pool beside it was still. The reflection of the trees in the fading light made it look like a portal to another realm. Theon sank to his knees, letting the hush of the Godwood envelop him. He closed his eyes. In the quiet, he felt the old gods bearing witness to his turmoil. He thought of everything that had led him here, Ned Stark's quiet kindness, Robb's laughter, the oath he had made to guard Winterfell. The ghosts of Pike shrank away in his mind, receding into a place of heartbreak and memory. I am Theon of House Greyjoy, he whispered. But I am also Theon of Winterfell. A wind rustled the branches overhead as though in answer. The old gods never spoke plainly, but in that moment, Theon felt a fleeting sense of absolution. He bowed his head, for once letting a tear slip down his cheek. Perhaps Ned Stark's spirit was there too, watching him, proud of the choice he had made. In the gloom of the red-leaf trees, Theon felt a sliver of peace. In the following days, the news of the victory over Asha's raiders brought a swell of relief through the north. Ravens flew to the outlying keeps and villages, proclaiming that the king in the North's men had thwarted the Ironborn advance near Torrhen Square, that the traitor's daughter, Balon Greyjoy's own, had been captured. Theon caught wind of the whispers that spread among the small folk. They praised him as a hero, the Greyjoy who stood with the Starks. Others looked on him with guarded curiosity, unsure if his loyalty could truly be trusted. But the fear of further raids eased, at least for now. They placed Asha and the surviving Ironborn in the dungeons under close guard. Ser Roderick set men to guard the coasts and keep watch for any renewed attacks. Balon Greyjoy's ambitions might not end with a single defeat, but at least for the moment, the North was spared another onslaught. Robb Stark was informed by Raven of Theon's victory and the capture of Asha, though no immediate response came back. Robb was deep in his own war against the Lannisters, forging alliances with the Riverlands, dealing blow after blow to Tywin Lannister's forces. Theon wondered if the news would bring Robb some measure of relief, or if it would simply be another worry on an already tall stack. In the hush of those uncertain days, Theon kept himself busy. He checked the fortifications, saw to the training of new recruits, and offered counsel to Bran. The boy lord grew increasingly confident in his role, though the strain showed in the lines of his face. He liked to talk with Theon about the old days, brief, light moments that reminded them both of simpler times when they'd shoot arrows in the yard and race to climb the walls. That past felt distant now, overshadowed by war's grim reality. Theon also visited the dungeons, though he was not entirely sure why. Perhaps he wished to speak with Asha to see if she still intended to spit in his face or if there was some flicker of understanding. He made his way down the winding steps, passing the torchlit corridors that smelled of damp stone and rot. At the cell where Asha was kept, 2 guards flanked the iron bars. They let him pass but kept a watchful eye. Asha stood when he entered, her hair matted, her clothes torn. She was proud even in captivity, lifting her chin defiantly. Theon stood a pace from the bars, meeting her gaze. For a moment, neither spoke. The torches cast dancing shadows on the walls. Well, Asha said at last, voice thick with scorn. Come to gloat. No, Theon answered quietly. I came to see if there was anything you wanted to say. About father, the raids, anything. She snorted. You think I'll beg for my freedom? Cry for mercy from these wolves? Theon shook his head. I suppose not. He swallowed, pressing forward. Asha, I wish it hadn't come to this. Truly. but I could not stand by while you destroyed villages and killed innocents." She laughed, the sound echoing hollowly. "You speak like some chivalrous knight. Have these wolves made you soft? We are Ironborn, pillage and reave is what we do." "Maybe so, but I'm not," Theon said, voice tight. "Not anymore." Asha eyed him with something like pity. "You think you're a wolf, but I can still smell the salt on you, brother. You can't change your blood." He gritted his teeth. "We are what we choose to be. Blood alone doesn't rule me. I once thought father would see sense, that he might join Robb and earn a place of honor, but he's chosen the old ways and you followed him. Now you face the consequences." "Honor," she spat. "That's a fine word for those who would rather kneel than fight for what's theirs." She shook her head. "Theon, father will not let this stand. You've humiliated him. First you were taken as hostage and now you turn your sword against us. He'll come in force eventually." Theon felt a chill pass through him. Perhaps she was right, but he refused to be cowed. "Let him come. We'll face him." Asha's eyes glittered. "When did you become so bold?" "When I realized I had something worth protecting," Theon said softly. "Goodbye, Asha." She did not respond as he turned away, her expression unreadable in the flickering torchlight. Theon left her there, the echo of her words following him up the steps. He emerged into the corridor, the air feeling fresher but still carrying the weight of conflict. Time passed in slow drips. Letters arrived from the south, from the Riverlands, from White Harbor. The realm was consumed by war on multiple fronts. Robb Stark's victories were whispered of in Winterfell's halls, though the constant threat of reprisal from the Lannisters hung over them. In the east, Stannis Baratheon gathered strength. Somewhere in the storms of the Westerlands, Tywin Lannister regrouped, thirsting for revenge. And out on the sea, Balon Greyjoy brooded, perhaps planning his next strike. Yet in Winterfell, life went on as it always had, with ravens to feed, horses to groom, meals to be cooked. The slow cycle of the seasons turned. Harvest came, with the small folk gathering what they could before the snows deepened. The looming northern winter cast a long shadow over them all, a reminder that war was not the only threat to their survival. Through it all, Theon stayed close to Bran, supporting the boys' decisions, helping maintain the castle's routine in Robb's absence. They came to rely on each other in unexpected ways. Theon provided the muscle, the strategic perspective, and the knowledge of how raiders might think, while Bran offered the quiet wisdom that Ned Stark had instilled in him. A sense of justice that balanced Theon's more aggressive impulses. Maester Luwin advised them both, ever watchful and patient. Months slipped by, punctuated by rumors of battle or the arrival of wounded men from the south. Theon found a surprising comfort in the steady life, free of the old resentments and doubts he carried. He belonged to the north now, as surely as the dire wolves belonged to the frozen forests. He stood on the ramparts one twilight, staring at the pale sky. The memory of Pike felt distant, like a dream. He wondered if there would ever come a day when he might stand upon the Iron Islands again, but not as a supplicant to Balon's designs. Perhaps one day, Robb would unify the realm under the king in the north and the Ironborn would be forced to make peace. Or perhaps the old tensions would never die. A soft sound of footsteps behind him made him turn. Bran approached, with Hodder looming at his back. Theon offered the boy a nod. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked gently. Bran shook his head. "Bad dreams," he murmured. "Wolves in the snow howling. I can never tell if it's Summer's thoughts or my own." Theon crouched down so he was more on eye level with Bran. "You're a true Stark," he said. "Sometimes I think the old magic runs in your veins. Maybe those dreams are a gift." Bran peered at him curiously. "A gift? Maybe it's the land speaking to you," Theon mused, thinking of the weirwoods and the godswood's hush. "Or maybe the dire wolf inside you is just restless. Either way, you shouldn't fear it." Bran looked out over the walls to the dusky horizon. Do you miss them? The Iron Islands?" Theon paused, surprised by the question. "I used to," he admitted. "For a long time I dreamt of going back, winning my father's favor, being the proud heir he wanted. But after seeing what he's done, how he attacked the north without mercy, no, I don't miss him or the islands anymore. My place is here." Bran's eyes flickered with sympathy. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Theon forced a wry smile. "Don't be. The wolves are a better pack than the Krakens ever were." He rose to his feet, ruffling Bran's hair gently. "Come on, let's get you inside before the cold bites." Bran nodded and Hodder carefully lifted him. They made their way back into the keep, the torches casting elongated shadows on the stone walls. Theon followed, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. In the hush of the evening, Winterfell felt timeless, a bastion of memories and hope. Whatever storms might rage outside these walls, he was determined to hold this place fast. The next major turning point came on a crisp morning when the ravens brought tidings of the war's progression. Robb Stark had won another significant battle, capturing key Lannister lords, but at a cost. Men were lost, wounded. Theon felt an ache that he was not beside his friend in the thick of it, but Robb had entrusted him with guarding the home front. What they did not expect was the raven from the Iron Islands, Balon Greyjoy's own seal, broken by Maester Luwin's shaking hands. It was a terse letter, proclaiming that the Iron Fleet had mustered again, that Balon would not rest until he reclaimed his daughter and demanded the North's submission. There was a final line that chilled Theon. "My wayward son has made his choice, and he will pay the iron price for his treachery." They read the letter in Bran Solar, the boy lord presiding in the high-backed chair. Ser Rodrik stood to one side, face grim. Theon forced himself to remain impassive, though each word struck him like a blow. Balon was declaring open war yet again, threatening a full-scale invasion if Winterfell did not surrender Asha and accept the Iron Islands' dominion. "Can he do it?" Bran asked. "Does he have enough ships, enough men?" Theon exhaled. "The Iron Fleet is formidable, yes, but to mount a massive invasion of the North would be no easy feat. He'd need to land forces along the coast, then try to hold territory. The North is too vast. It would be a fool's errand, but father has done foolish things before." Ser Rodrik nodded. "We must not underestimate him, however. If he tries to siege White Harbor or Moat Cailin, we could face a grave threat." Maester Luwin looked between them. "Shall we send word to King Robb in the south?" Bran answered, "Yes, he must know, but we can't expect him to come riding north. He has his war to fight against the Lannisters." He turned to Theon. "We'll have to handle this ourselves." Theon squared his shoulders. "We can. We have the men in the north if we gather them. Balon's threat might be real, but his success depends on surprise and swift strikes. We'll be ready this time." He lost Asha's raiding force. That was a serious blow to him. His eyes strayed to the parchment again, reading the lines that called him traitor. A swirling mixture of hurt and determination rose in him. If Balon thought to break him with threats, he was mistaken. He was no longer that boy who had been taken hostage. He was done bending or begging for his father's acceptance. Now, if Balon came, Theon would meet him with northern steel. Ser Rodrik began to draft letters to the northern lords, calling on them to maintain vigilance along the coast. White Harbor, Bear Island, and even Deepwood Motte would need to be on guard. Theon also suggested they fortify Moat Cailin, the ancient stronghold that guarded the causeway into the north. If the Ironborn thought to move inland in large numbers, Moat Cailin would be their first major obstacle. Bran looked to Theon after the flurry of decisions had been made. "Will you lead men there? To Moat Cailin?" Theon hesitated, then nodded. "If you wish. Ser Rodrik can remain here to protect Winterfell. I'll go to Moat Cailin, see the defenses for myself. We'll gather more men from the scattered holds along the way." He paused, wanting to reassure Bran. "I'll not let them through, Bran. I promise." Bran tried to smile, though he looked so young in that moment. "I know," he whispered. "Go and be safe." So it was decided. Theon would ride south to Moat Cailin, muster the North's defenses, and brace for whatever move Balon Greyjoy made next. He felt a strange sense of purpose. This was what he had chosen, to stand between the North and the ambitions of his father. One more step down the path of no return. A brisk wind blew off the swamps surrounding Moat Cailin, carrying a faint stench of bog and decay. The ancient fortress loomed in crumbling ruin. 3 tall towers once stood proudly, commanding the neck, but now only 2 rose above the marsh, their stone battered by centuries of weather and war. The walls connecting them were partially collapsed in places, but enough remained to form a formidable choke point along the causeway. Tactically, Moat Cailin was a near-impenetrable bastion against any army coming from the south. From the north, however, it was more vulnerable. Theon arrived with a contingent of 200 men. Over the subsequent weeks, more trickled in from nearby holds, raising their numbers to nearly 500. Not a massive force, but enough to hold the ruin against a direct assault. They worked tirelessly, patching the breaches in the walls with timber and rubble, establishing watchtowers, setting traps in the boggy ground. Theon oversaw it all, finding a fierce satisfaction in preparing for the worst. He stood atop one of the towers one evening, gazing out over the swamp. The sun had set, leaving a purple-orange smear along the horizon. The marshlands stretched in every direction, dotted with pools of still water that glimmered in the fading light. Theon's cloak whipped around him in the wind. He wondered if any Iron-born longships had sailed up the Fever River or found some hidden inlet. If so, they'd still have to march through the hazardous swamps to get here. That alone might break their spirits. He heard footsteps behind him. Turning, he saw Dagmar, a grizzled veteran of the North who had fought at the Whispering Wood. The man gave a respectful nod. "All's quiet, Lord Theon." Lord Theon. The title still felt odd, but the Northmen had started using it almost as a mark of respect and acceptance. "No sign of movement in the swamps?" Theon asked. Dagmar shook his head. "None. We've scouts out in every direction. Nothing bigger than a stray gator out there." He hesitated, studying Theon. "You think they'll come?" Theon released a breath. "Balon Greyjoy is stubborn, but I don't see how he can mount a large-scale invasion up here, not with so many of his raiders scattered or captured. He might try to nibble at the coastline. If he's wise, he won't come at all." Dagmar huffed. "Fools seldom learn wisdom." He eyed Theon curiously. "Forgive me for saying, but I admire your choice, lad. You had a foot in two worlds, yet you chose ours. The men see that." Surprised by the frankness, Theon nodded slowly. "Thank you," he managed. He looked out at the sinking sun, the sky growing darker. "I only did what felt right." Dagmar gave a grunt of approval, then stepped away, leaving Theon alone with his thoughts. In the silence, Theon reflected on all that had changed since he first left Winterfell at Robb's side. He had come close to traveling to Pike, to seeking an alliance with Balon. In another life, he might have brought the Iron-born down upon Winterfell from within, becoming the very traitor some men had feared he would be. But he had not. He had chosen differently. Perhaps he had saved not only Winterfell but himself. With a sigh, Theon turned from the parapet. He made his way down the winding steps to the courtyard, where men were preparing the evening meal. The smell of stew and bread wafted through the murky air. Soldiers gathered around fires, passing skins of ale. There was a weariness, but also a camaraderie. Theon recognized many of them. He had trained with some, bled with others. They greeted him with nods or friendly jests. He offered them a faint smile in return. He settled near one fire, warming his hands while a black-haired youth ladled stew into bowls. The others made room for him. They told stories of the battles they had fought, men they had lost, families waiting back in the distant villages. Theon listened, occasionally interjecting with a wry comment, but mostly content to share in the Ire company. He felt a sense of belonging that he had never known among the Ironborn. Here, at least, was a brotherhood forged by mutual respect rather than fear or raw conquest. Night thickened, stars emerging one by one above the bog. The men drifted off to their posts or their bedrolls. Theon found his way to a small chamber within the partially restored tower. It was drafty, but at least it offered a modicum of privacy. He lay down on a pallet of straw and furs, listening to the wind moan through the cracks in the stones. His thoughts churned with the uncertain future. Perhaps Balon Greyjoy's threat would fade, and Theon could remain here, safeguarding the north until Robb returned triumphant. Or perhaps war would come to Moat Cailin. If so, Theon would stand at the walls, swords in hand, and fight to the last. He felt no fear at the prospect. He had chosen his path. As sleep crept over him, he let his mind drift to Winterfell, the tall, gray walls, the warmth of the great hearth, Bran's trusting eyes, the direwolves prowling the godwood, the sense of home. Yes, home. It was a word that once evoked Pike for him, the crash of waves and the salt sting in the air. Now, all that remained of Pike was a bitter memory overshadowed by his father's cruelty and ambition. Winterfell was the place where his heart resided, with the family he had found in the Starks. He slept and dreamed of wolves running under the moon, their howls echoing across the cold, northern plains, and in that dream Theon ran among them, no longer alone. Weeks turned into months. Theon maintained Moat Cailin's defenses, receiving sporadic ravens from Winterfell. Asha remained imprisoned. Balon Greyjoy raged from afar, sending smaller raids to the northern coasts, each quickly repelled by vigilant Stark men. Bit by bit, the Ironborn's foray seemed to lose momentum. Some whispered that Balon's pride was wounded beyond repair, that the cost of continuing this doomed war was too steep for the Iron Islands to bear. Others claimed Balon was simply biding his time, plotting a more decisive strike. But such a strike never came. The seas turned rough with the approach of full winter, making large-scale naval invasions perilous. The North, by contrast, braced itself with characteristic stoicism. The days grew shorter, the air sharper. Men spoke of how the White Walkers might be stirring in the far north, though such tales sounded like old Nan's stories to many. Still, a sense of foreboding touched everything. In the south, Robb Stark's war raged on, but the Lannisters had not managed to break him. Rumors abounded, whispers of a red wedding that might have been, of secret alliances with House Tyrell, of betrayals in King's Landing. The chaos of the realm suited the Ironborn's opportunistic nature, but they had found themselves stymied by Theon's efforts. It seemed that Theon Greyjoy's loyalty to the Starks had not only saved Winterfell but also contained Balon's ambitions to the coasts. At last, Theon received the summons he had waited for, a raven from Robb Stark himself, commanding him to return north with enough men to garrison Winterfell once more. The letter was brief but carried unmistakable warmth. Robb thanked Theon for safeguarding the neck and invited him home to stand at his side in the final push of the war. Theon's chest swelled with pride and relief. Home, he thought. He wasted no time in gathering a portion of the men at Moat Cailin to accompany him, leaving a smaller force behind to hold the fortress just in case. Ser Roderick would coordinate further reinforcements as needed. The ride back to Winterfell was both arduous and strangely elating. Snow dusted the trees and the breath of horses steamed in the cold. Theon led his men at a steady pace, eager to see the old gates again, to walk through the courtyard he had once haunted as a restless ward, uncertain of his place. Now he returned as a sworn protector of House Stark. Days later, when the gray walls finally rose into view, Theon felt a surge of emotion, a warmth that banished the chill of winter from his bones. The men riding behind him let out cries of relief. The gates parted and the people of Winterfell gathered to welcome them, calling out greetings and cheering. Theon spotted Bran on the ramparts, waving, with Summer by his side. In the courtyard, he dismounted amid a swirl of excitement. Bran arrived and Theon bowed his head briefly. The boy lord grinned, the direwolf at his heel. "Welcome home," Bran said. "Home," Theon echoed, returning the smile. "How have things been?" Bran shrugged. "Quiet, mostly. Asha is still in the dungeons. Ser Roderick has been working to keep the region safe. And we've heard more news of Robb's victories." They walked side by side into the castle. Servants rushed to tend to the horses, stable boys darting around. Theon felt the old familiarity of the great keep, the corridors lit by torches, the warm smell of bread and roast meat wafting from the kitchens. He inhaled deeply, savoring it. That night, they held a modest feast in the hall to celebrate the men's return. Theon sat at Bran's side, flanked by Ser Roderick, Maester Luwin, and others who had become the backbone of Winterfell's leadership in Robb's absence. They spoke of Moat Cailin, of the preparations for a long winter, of the alliances Robb had forged. Theon felt a sense of camaraderie that left him humbled. These were not just the Stark's men, they were his brothers in arms. As the feast wore on, Theon slipped away. The boisterous clamor of men drinking and laughing seemed distant to him. He found himself wandering the halls, drawn to the memory of Ned Stark's voice, of the time Theon had lived here as a ward, no, as a hostage, though it had not felt like it, not truly. He passed by the old training yard, recalling the day he'd first sparred with Robb. He passed the bedchambers where once he had told Bran tall tales of sea monsters and drowned gods. Eventually, he ended up in the crypts beneath Winterfell, where the kings of winter and ancient lords of House Stark were entombed. It was silent, the torch he carried casting dancing shadows on the carved stone faces. He moved slowly, footsteps echoing. The statues of the Starks stood eternal vigil, their stone direwolves at their feet, swords across their laps. He paused before the tomb of Eddard Stark. The statue was an uncanny likeness, carved in Ned's image. Stern but kind, wearing a simple crown of the north, a sword across his knees. In the flickering torchlight, Theon gazed upon that face, a swirl of gratitude and regret constricting his throat. "My lord," he said softly, though the crypt was empty. "I hope I've done right by you, by your family." The silence held, but Theon felt a quiet reassurance, as though Ned's spirit offered absolution without words. Theon swallowed, placing a hand gently against the cold stone. "Thank you," he murmured, voice trembling, "for everything." He turned and climbed the steps, leaving the crypt behind. The old grief weighed on him, but also a sense of resolve. The North might be battered by war, but Theon Greyjoy, once a hostage, once torn between two worlds, now stood proudly with House Stark. He would fight for them until his last breath, if need be. Outside, snow had begun to fall in soft flakes, drifting across the courtyard. Theon lifted his face to the sky, letting the cold touch his skin. Winter was truly here, but Winterfell stood strong. a beacon of resilience in a realm torn by war. He watched the flakes settle on the stones, ephemeral and pure. In his heart, a quiet certainty pulsed, that he, too, could be steadfast as these ancient walls, shaped by the storms but never broken. Another fortnight passed. Word reached Winterfell that Robb had secured a truce with certain lords of the Westerlands, enabling him to march north if he chose. The realm was in turmoil, but the young wolf's star seemed to rise despite the odds. Theon felt a rush of anticipation. At last, perhaps, they would see Robb again, the king in the north returning to his ancestral seat. When the day came, it came with a fanfare of horns. A column of northern bannermen, weary from war but unbroken, rode through the gates of Winterfell. At their head was Robb Stark, taller and broader than Theon remembered, shoulders squared, a pelt of gray-white fur around him, the crown of the king in the north upon his brow. Grey Wind, his dire wolf, padded beside his horse, eyes glowing like embers. The courtyard erupted with shouts of welcome. Bran, Hodder, and the others hurried forward, while Theon stood in the forefront, heart pounding. Robb dismounted, clasping hands with the men around him, exchanging greetings, his face alight with relief. Finally, his gaze locked with Theon's. For a moment, neither moved. Then Robb strode forward and Theon met him halfway, grasping the king in the north's arm in a fierce handshake that turned into an embrace. The courtyard cheered at the sight, men clapping one another on the back. The direwolves milled about, Grey Wind and Summer sniffing each other as if exchanging their own greetings. Robb pulled back, a grin on his face. "My brother," he said, voice thick with emotion. "I heard what you did, holding Moat Cailin, capturing Asha. You've done more than I could have asked." Theon felt a lump in his throat. "I only did my duty. What you trusted me to do." Robb nodded, looking him up and down. "I never doubted you." He glanced around at the gathered men, the battered northern banners waving overhead. "Come, let's get inside. We have much to discuss." They moved into the great hall where a roaring fire awaited. Robb perched on the dais but insisted Theon stand close by, along with Bran, Ser Roderick, and Maester Luwin. They spoke of the victories in the south, the alliances forged, and the precarious peace that might be on the horizon. Balon Greyjoy, while still a threat, seemed to have pulled back into his island strongholds, licking his wounds. Asha remained imprisoned, the only leverage they truly had. Robb rubbed his temples. "Perhaps I should send an offer of ransom to Balon," he mused. "His daughter's freedom in exchange for a binding peace." Theon exchanged a look with Bran, who looked uncertain. "He's proud," Theon said, "but perhaps even he can recognize a losing cause. He's lost too many men and Asha is his heir now." Robb nodded. "We'll see. Meanwhile, the Lannisters remain my main concern." He looked to Theon. "I want you by my side in the battles to come." Theon felt a jolt of gratitude and excitement. "I'd be honored, Your Grace." He smirked slightly, adding, "But you'll forgive me if I sometimes forget to call you Your Grace? We've known each other too long for formalities." Robb laughed, a sound that rippled through the hall with surprising warmth. You'll call me Robb in private, or I'll hear none of it." He turned to Bran. "And you, little brother, you've grown into quite the Lord of Winterfell." Bran blushed slightly under the praise, but there was pride in his eyes. "I did what I could. With help." He glanced at Theon, who dipped his head in acknowledgement. The evening turned celebratory, though the war was far from over. For the North, it was a moment of respite, a coming together of those who had endured dark times and emerged stronger. Theon found himself in the swirl of conversation, men clasping him on the shoulder, thanking him for his valor. He deflected the praise with awkward shrugs, uneasy with the hero's mantle. But inside, a long-suppressed yearning was finally fulfilled, acceptance. Later, as the fire died down to embers, Theon and Robb stood near the hearth, cups of ale in hand. The hall had emptied of most revelers. Bran had gone to bed, Ser Roderick was seeing to the watch, and only a few lingered at tables, talking in low voices. Theon sipped his drink, studying Robb's face. War had aged him, etched lines of worry on his brow, but the boy Theon remembered was still there behind the king's gaze. Robb spoke quietly. "I've missed you, Theon. I know the war has changed us all, but when Father died, I felt I lost not just him, but the childhood we shared. You were a part of that. I'm glad we can still stand together." Theon swallowed, emotion tightening his chest. "I'm sorry I wasn't there at King's Landing to protect your father." Guilt still gnawed at him. If only there had been a way to save Ned. "You were a ward, Theon. There was nothing you could have done." Robb placed a hand on Theon's shoulder. "Father wouldn't want us to drown in guilt." He wants us to protect our home, our family." He paused. "And that's what you've done. Thank you." Their eyes met and an unspoken bond passed between them, stronger than any vow. Theon nodded, words failing him. He clinked his cup to Robb's and they drank in a quiet toast. For Eddard Stark, for the North, for the family they had forged through trust and hardship. In that moment, Theon felt complete, like a piece of a puzzle that had finally clicked into place. He was Theon Greyjoy by name and blood, but more truly he was a wolf of Winterfell, a brother to the Starks, shield of the North. Whatever battles lay ahead against Lannisters or Ironborn, he would face them with unwavering loyalty, a sword arm ready, a heart steeled by the unbreakable bond he shared with this family. And so the night wore on, the flames flickering against the ancient stone walls, and Theon felt the North wrap him in its embrace. He thought of Balan's threats, of the brutal raids, of the men he had lost. He remembered Asha's sneer in the dungeon, the crash of waves on Pike. All of it receded to the edges of his mind, overshadowed by the warmth of the hearth, the knowledge that he had chosen well, and the certain pride that Ned Stark, were he here, would call him son in all but name. For Theon Greyjoy, the boy torn from one home and raised in another, that was more than enough. He closed his eyes and listened to the wind outside, carrying the distant howls of the northern winter, a choir of wolves singing in the dark. He was one of them, now and always. Robb Stark's return to Winterfell sent a ripple of celebration through the old castle. Snow whirled across the courtyards, swirling in pale gusts against the gray stone. Servants and guards bustled about, tending to horses and hauling supplies indoors, mindful of the deepening cold that signaled winter's firm arrival. Though many in the castle were weary from war, the atmosphere carried an undercurrent of cautious optimism. Their king in the north had come home, their halls were intact, and Balon Greyjoy's threat to the coastline had receded to half-hearted raids that seldom reached beyond fishing villages. The final holdouts of Ironborn reavers still scuttled along the shore, but they no longer boasted the strength to strike inland with any real force. At the high table in the Great Hall, Robb presided over a somber feast of thanks for those men who had defended the north. No lavish displays were possible, war had sapped resources, and winter's cold breath made every morsel precious. Yet the people took heart in the simple abundance of hot stew, fresh-baked bread, and ale poured into well-worn cups. Torches flickered along the walls, casting dancing shadows. Timber crackled in the hearth behind the dais, where a massive boar roasted on a spit. The aroma was rich with rosemary and onion, and the crowd's mood brightened as they filled bowls and bellies. Outside, the wind howled across the battlements, but inside there was warmth and fellowship. Theon stood at Robb's right hand. He had taken a seat initially, only to find himself restless, getting up to greet old friends or share a moment of laughter with the men who had ridden beside him at Moat Cailin. Now he hovered close, as if ensuring no threat lurked unseen. He felt an odd swell of contentment. This was the place he had long imagined returning to, but on different terms. Once he had dreamed of walking into Winterfell at the head of his father's victorious host. Now, after so many trials, he wore no illusions about belonging to Pike. His father's scorn was etched in the memory of that final letter. "My wayward son has made his choice, and he will pay the iron price." Balon Greyjoy's condemnation had stung, but every day spent guarding the north, his true home, helped scab that wound. When the plates were empty and the folk had eaten their fill, Robb stood to address them. Grey wind prowled at the base of the dais, his ears twitching as all talk faded. Silence fell like a soft hush of snow. "My friends," Robb said, his voice carrying across the long tables, "we have all sacrificed for the cause of the North. We have fought the Lannisters in the Riverlands, and we have held back the Ironborn here at home. No victory is won without cost, and it may be that we have battles yet to fight. But tonight, at least, let us honor those who have fallen. Let us remember their bravery and rededicate ourselves to protecting our families and our land." There was a moment of stillness as the gathering bowed their heads. A few murmured words to the old gods or the seven, whichever faith they held. Theon's gaze slid across the tables to find Bran, who was seated in a sturdy wheelchair with a thick wolfskin draped over his legs. The boy's expression was solemn, but there was a glint of hard-earned pride in his eyes. The lords of the North had learned not to underestimate Bran Stark. Though young, he carried himself with a steadiness that reminded them all of Eddard Stark. Robb let the silence linger before lifting his cup. "We stand as one pack," he said quietly. "The war is not done, but the North endures." They drank, a quiet toast. Then the room exhaled as if by unspoken agreement, the tension loosening a fraction. Men began to talk in subdued tones, exchanging stories or greetings from distant holds. Winterfell was alive again, not in the carefree way of summer feasts, but with a practical gratitude that every day of relative peace was a small victory. When the gathering began to thin, Theon caught Rob's eye and the two of them stepped away from the dais, heading toward a dim alcove near the hearth to speak in private. Grey Wind padded after them, sniffing at Theon's boots as if reacquainting himself with an old friend. "How fares the Riverlands?" Theon asked quietly once they were alone. "I've heard rumors of heavy fighting near Harrenhal." Rob nodded. "It's been brutal. Tywin Lannister is a wily commander, and every time we've forced him to retreat, he finds a new path to menace us. But we've taken key stretches of territory and the Freys still claim to support me, albeit with a watchful eye on my every move." He sighed. "I've had to negotiate some delicate alliances. The Riverlords are loyal, but they worry about the toll on their people." Theon grunted. "And the Iron Throne? Is Joffrey still, well, Joffrey?" A bitter twist appeared on Rob's lips. "As far as I know, he remains as cruel as ever. Word is he's had trouble keeping King's Landing under control. Riots, discontent, rumors about his parentage, it all brews beneath the surface. Stannis Baratheon has solidified Dragonstone and claims all manner of dark omens that he'll be the righteous king. But the Lannisters hold the city for now." Theon glanced around to ensure no curious ears lingered. "And Balon Greyjoy? Are you certain he won't make another play for the north?" Rob's features hardened. "I'm not certain of anything where Greyjoys are concerned. But thanks to you, Theon, we have Asha in custody. That's a powerful bargaining chip if Balon has any true paternal feeling." He paused, letting the thought settle. "I've also reinforced the sea. Ostal lords, the days of quick raids and easy spoils are done. If Balon tries to land a larger force, we'll be ready." Theon took a slow breath, picturing his father's face once more. "He won't act rashly if he thinks it'll risk Asha's life. She's his heir now that my brothers are dead." Theon stared into the fire. In his own twisted way, he might value her survival. Rob studied Theon with undisguised sympathy. "If we can force him to negotiate, maybe we can put an end to bloodshed on that front. The war in the south is enough to consume all our energies." Theon nodded. "I stand ready to do whatever you command, Rob." A small smile ghosted across Rob's lips. "I know, but you're not my subject alone, Theon, you're my brother. And I'd have you keep watch over Winterfell again for a time while I journey south to rally our bannermen for the next push. I must see to the Riverlords, see what resources remain for a renewed campaign." Theon hesitated. A memory of earlier days arose, of how he'd once chafed at being left behind, yearning to plunge into the thick of battle. But that restlessness had dimmed. Protecting Winterfell was no small task. "If that's what you need," he replied, "I'll do it gladly." Rob put a hand on Theon's shoulder. "Bran is more than capable of day-to-day governance, but Winterfell needs a battle-seasoned commander at his side. You've proven your worth. And believe me, if I can, I'll call you to ride with me when we face Tywin again." A faint grin touched Theon's face. "I'll hold you to that." They clasped forearms, an unspoken understanding passing between them. In the flicker of the hearth's light, Theon glimpsed the seriousness etched in Rob's features. So much weight sat on the shoulders of one so young, but the king in the north bore it with quiet resolve. Theon thought of Ned Stark's dignity, of how the man had faced death for his sense of honor. Rob had inherited that same unbreakable fortitude, and Theon felt a surge of pride. Soon enough they parted ways. Rob left to speak with his bannermen about the upcoming march, while Theon drifted through the hall, exchanging pleasantries with old friends. He was about to retire to his chamber when he caught sight of Bran waiting near the dais, Summer dozing at the boy's feet. Bran beckoned Theon closer. Theon crossed the rush-strewn floor, passing men who were slumped over the tables or stumbling off to find beds. Bran's eyes gleamed with curiosity as Theon approached. "The men say you fought the Ironborn at Torrhen's Square," the boy remarked. "They say you defeated their champion single-handedly." Theon cracked a wry smile. "Single-handedly is a stretch. I had a few hundred friends with me, but yes, I fought among the front lines." Bran nodded eagerly. "And did you really capture Asha yourself?" He felt a twinge of discomfort. "Ser Roderick was just as crucial as I was, but I pursued her when she tried to flee. My horse was faster, or perhaps I was more desperate." The memory still carried a tense coil in his chest. "She yielded." Bran seemed to sense Theon's reluctance to boast. "It's still impressive. Everyone says you've brought great honor to Winterfell. He lowered his voice. I'm proud of you, Theon. Father would be proud of you. A pang lanced Theon's heart, that same swirl of gratitude and sadness. Thank you, Bran, he managed. The boy had grown in mind if not in body, and his opinions carried a gravity beyond his years. Summer stirred at Bran's feet, yawning a toothy wolf yawn. Bran gave a faint laugh, shifting in his seat. I'm tired, but I'll be up half the night thinking of all the stories these men told. Theon reached out to ruffle Bran's hair. You'll have years yet to hear more. Go on, rest now. Tomorrow, life in Winterfell continues. Bran smiled and motioned for Hodder, who lingered nearby, to push his chair. As they started off, Theon lingered a moment longer in the hall, absorbing the final glimmer of the hearth's warmth and the low murmur of men dozing off. For all the gloom that war had cast over the realm, Winterfell still pulsed with a steadfast heartbeat. He found solace in that. He left at last, climbing the winding stairs to the chamber set aside for him. Once he'd occupied a smaller room in one of the towers, but now Robb had granted him larger quarters befitting a valued commander. A small brazier glowed near the bed, the coals banked so that only a dull red pulse remained. Theon shrugged off his cloak and mail, settling onto the bed. In the hush, he listened to the wind outside, a soft whistle against the shutters. It carried a sense of distant seas, as if the wind had once traveled across the waters near Pike but found him here in the north instead. He closed his eyes and let the weariness seep away. Within moments, sleep claimed him.